Helen, welcome to the world today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up on the program. World leaders react to President Joe Biden announcing his withdrawal from the presidential race and endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris. Reactions stretch as far as here in Africa, where Nigerians, Kenyans, and South Africans are also reacting. Plus, Kenyan officials appeal for help in finding containers of a highly toxic chemical looted from an overturned lorry. The world today starts now. It's been almost 24 hours since U.S. President Joe Biden announced his withdrawal from the 2024 presidential race and his endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris. It appears Harris herself might have found favor with some leading members of the party. More leading Democrats are said to be backing her bid to clinch the party's ticket in place of Biden and have increased donations in the last several hours. However, some key Democrats have yet endorsed Harris, and they include former President Barack Obama. The vice president will be making a speech later today at a pre-scheduled event celebrating the National Collegiate Athletic Association Championship teams. Harris has said that she will earn the nomination of the party, a huge challenge for her. Now, if she does seal it, November's election will be historic in more ways than one. As news broke Sunday evening of the change in Democratic pitch for the November elections, VOA's Jackson Munganyi put together this report, highlighting the news and the issues ahead.
Hello, I'm VOA's Jackson Munganyi. Now, I'm sure by now you've heard that President Joe Biden has announced that he will not seek re-election, which is a historic moment in American politics. Biden's choice was influenced by concerns within his party regarding his age, which is highlighted by the fact that he is the oldest serving president in U.S. history at the age of 81. Additionally, the first debate of the current election season raised questions about his mental sharpness and stamina required for a rigorous campaign season. After announcing his decision, Biden endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris, which, if she ultimately secures the nomination, she would be the first black woman and first Asian American to lead a major political party's ticket. This could have a profound impact on the political landscape, energizing various demographics within the electorate and potentially reshaping the party's strategies and policies. Analysts say that the challenge right now for the Democratic Party is how to quickly unify around a new candidate to maintain momentum and to present a cohesive front against a highly energized Republican Party and find ways to energize the base while appealing to those swing state voters and the independents.
Well, as expected, reactions to President Biden's announcement of withdrawal from the presidential race have gone beyond American borders, with world leaders reacting to the news with an almost somber farewell tone. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said Biden had made defense and security central to his leadership. He said he respects the president's decision, which has been done in the interest of the American people. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his wife released a video in which they said that despite who becomes the next president of the United States, Israel remains America's indispensable and strong ally in the Middle East. He plans to see President Biden, whom he's known for over 40 years, and thank him for the things he did for Israel in the war with Hamas and during his long, distinguished career in public service as senator, vice president, and as president. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said President Biden has been a great friend of Australia, and that will continue. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said she has great respect for Biden's decision and that the president had done an incredible amount for transatlantic relations, and not just during his term as president. French Foreign Minister Stéphane Séjourné says there will be no change to European interests, which will continue to be defended no matter what administration enters the White House after the November polls. And one of America's allies in Asia, Japan, says they recognize that President Biden thought it would be the best decision to withdraw from a political standpoint. Let's bring in international affairs commentator Joanna LeBlanc. She joins us from Washington. Joanna, great to see you. And the news must have been shocking to many Americans, but not to those in President Biden's inner circles. We understand he had a conversation with them before releasing the statement that he did on Sunday. This is a president who a few days before was trying to convince everyone he was the right man for the job. What do you think changed between then and yesterday?
Well, Amarachi, thank you for having me on. In politics, we're accustomed to politicians saying one thing and do the complete opposite. The reality is that this was foreseeable, especially after mega donors starting to pause on their donations, starting to withdraw their support for President Joe Biden. So we knew at any given moment he would have to withdraw from the race. And he did the right thing. And I think a lot of people had concerns regarding his age, one. Two, he just was not doing well in the polls. In the debate between he and former President Donald Trump was disastrous. We all watched it all over the world. And it was a very hard debate to watch because we saw a man whose health was on the decline. We saw a man who was clearly dealing with cognitive issues. And the question was for many of us here in America was, how can he maintain his stamina to run against former President former President former President Trump, rather. So I think it was the right decision. And now the party has to rally behind Vice President Kamala Harris. But as you know, the delegates had pledged to a Biden and Harris ticket, not a Harris and someone else's ticket. So there will be some challenges, but I think ultimately leading up to the convention, which is scheduled to take place next month in August, I think we're going to see the support from key leaders within the party. And right now, about more than 50 leaders, party leaders across this nation have actually endorsed Kamala Harris, and the donations started to pour in. So I think that ultimately everyone else will fall in line.
So I hear you, when you say that President Biden, of course, may have considered all of these other factors. His performance at the presidential debate holding in June, the first time that's ever happened in American history, where, presidential debates happen months before the elections themselves, and then with, big donors in the Democratic Party withdrawing their support. But I'm also wondering if it could also have anything to do with his health or the health of the Democratic Party itself, because issues of his candidacy was beginning to cause division within the party.
Yeah, I think these are very good questions and concerns because I think we all have seen the decline in President Biden's health over the past 2 years. We have seen snippets of it, but it was the very first time where the American public got to see him on screen for 1 whole hour, and it caused a great deal of concerns. But my question to the Democratic Party is that if we had known that there were some concerns with his health, why didn't we properly position Vice President Kamala Harris for a time such as this? And the reality is that most vice presidents in history, you don't hear much about them. They're quiet. They're in the back, because they don't want to overshadow the president. But if we know that there's a decline in the president's health, and there is a possibility that Kamala Harris may have to be the candidate for the presidency, I think the party should have done a better job at positioning her, at giving her the proper portfolios to work on. Like, for example, Kamala Harris is responsible for the border crisis, and it has been disastrous. And I don't think that she herself could address the border crisis. I think it's a foreign policy issue, also a domestic issue. So I think they could have given her better portfolios to work on to make her more likable and to make her be able to win the hearts of Americans a lot faster. But I think ultimately there's sufficient time for the party to campaign around her, to rally around her, and to make her more appealable to the American public and the American voters.
Time is something that the Democrats really have to, consider in this race. They have barely 4 months to make it to November. But as you mentioned, Kamala Harris, the vice president, she had been criticized for being laid back, not showing much ambition in the last couple of years at least. But in the early days of the Biden administration, she was also criticized for being too ambitious. In fact, they said she was the one making the decisions, and Biden was just repeating everything that Kamala Harris wanted. So can Democrats make up their mind really about this candidate?
They can. I think when you look at Kamala Harris's record, it's obvious that she has been a trailblazer her entire career. I mean, for goodness sakes, the woman was the Attorney General in California, one of the biggest states that we have, right? And then she went and became the first Black woman senator here at the United States Congress. I mean, those are significant milestones and accomplishments, and you don't achieve that by being mediocre. And she is known to being a robust, a fierce prosecutor. So it's going to be very interesting, Amarachi, because you're going to have the prosecutor who is running against the felon. And I think she's going to be tough on Trump. And I think Trump gonna have to be ready for that because we're gonna see a lot of her skills. And I think one of the things that Vice President Kamala Harris is really good at is debating, and she showed that when she ran for the presidency several years ago. So we shall see.
So she is, clinching, well, gaining a lot of support. We've seen, increased donations for her. And I'm suspecting it's because of, Biden, at least. Donations that would have gone to the Biden-Harris campaign are now going to Kamala Harris. She hasn't picked a vice presidential candidate yet. Probably after being nominated by the party, then she will. But amongst the big Democrats who are supporting her ambition to become the party's nominee, former President Barack Obama has not indicated any of such support. We're yet to hear anything from him regarding that. In fact, top Democrats are thinking that there should be a primary to give others a level playing field, those who also have presidential ambitions, to, try and see if, they can clinch the party's ticket.
Actually, former President Barack Obama has actually called for an open convention. And we have seen a great deal of silence by former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who represents Florida's, who represents a district in California, rather. So there have been a number of leaders within the Democratic Party that have called for an open convention. But look, the reality is that Vice President Harris was selected as the vice president for one reason and one reason only. It's because she would be able to take on the leadership if something were to happen to Joe Biden. So I think she's ready, she's qualified. And what's also interesting is that last night, there was a call with about 40,000 women, women of color here in America, who are strategizing and mobilizing on how they're going to get Vice President Kamala Harris the nomination. Because as we know, an endorsement is not sufficient. An endorsement is just an endorsement. It does not mean that she is the candidate for the Democratic Party, right? So it's going to take a little bit more strategizing, mobilizing, more endorsements coming from other key players. But they have been coming in. More than 50 party leaders have endorsed her, which is significant. We got an endorsement this morning, by the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore. And I think those are significant endorsements. So I think the party is positioning her so that by the time you make it to the convention, she would have garnered all of the support that she needs, and all of the delegates would have also pledged to move their votes from Joe Biden to a Kamala Harris ticket. Now, what's going to also happen is that to make Kamala Harris more appealable, she may have to announce her vice president candidate much sooner than what is usually done, which is usually that is announced at the convention, which is again scheduled to take place next month, because you're going to need a ticket to balance Kamala Harris. Preferably, it's probably going to have to be a white man, someone who's a veteran, who's married with children, and possibly from the Midwest to be able to attract those voters that Vice President Kamala Harris may not be able to attract.
So who are her choices here? Because I've seen posters on social media saying Harris Newsom, the California governor, he also has presidential ambitions, but he, interestingly, has endorsed Kamala Harris for presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. So who are other choices within the party?
There are some names being considered, like Ben Shapiro, who is a governor in Pennsylvania. And also, there's also a governor in Arizona that is also being considered, and the governor of the state of Maryland. He was recently elected as governor, but he reminds us so much of President Barack Obama. He is one that is very refreshing to watch in politics, and he has the ability to rally people, to inspire people, because what you're going to need is you're going to need a candidate in addition to Vice President Harris, who will be able to inspire people, who will be able to make people want to come out and vote, right? Because there are people who are committed to sitting this out. You have those folks who said that they're not voting because of Biden's position, foreign policy towards Israel and the Gaza conflict. You need to bring those people back to the table, because if you're not able to do that, what's going to happen is that you're going to have another 2016 where people did not show up to vote for Hillary Clinton, and thus you ended up with a Donald Trump. So a no vote for Harris will ultimately mean a vote for Donald Trump. So you're going to need someone who's going to be able to galvanize people, be able to mobilize folks, inspire people, make people want to be a part of the process, and make people feel inspired, and that we have new leadership in the country, and that we're going to move this country forward and address some of the country's most critical issues, like the healthcare issues, abortion rights, women reproductive rights, the student debt crisis, foreign policy issues such as the Israel and Gaza issue. It's going to be at the table again. And the migration crisis, right? How are they going to be able to address it? Is it going to be a policy that's going to put American first, but at the same time, make sure we take care of our friends and allies across the world?
Hillary Clinton did run for president in 2016, and I'm glad you mentioned her. She endorsed Kamala Harris yesterday, shortly after President Biden's announcement on social media platform X. Just wondering if both of them are friends, if they rub minds on issues, are their ideologies alike? I mean, and why would people be more receptive to Kamala Harris than to Hillary Clinton?
That's a good question, Amarachi. Obviously, Kamala Harris is younger than Hillary Clinton, and I think one of the reasons why Biden has been pushed out is partly because of his age. So people want a fresh blood. They want new faces in American politics, especially at the top of the ticket. So look, I think that if the Democratic Party puts all of its resources behind Kamala Harris, I think that she would do much better than Hillary did in 2016. But it's not going to be an easy fight. It's not going to be an easy fight. We know that former President Donald Trump is committed to winning this election. He's committed to restore America's democracy, as he always says. He is committed to making America great again. So it's not going to be an easy fight. And the numbers don't look good right now. I mean, in some instances, Kamala Harris is doing better than Joe Biden would have done in certain states and in certain areas in America. But in the key battleground states, Mr. Trump is leading at least 5 of those 6 states. So it's going to be a tough fight, but I think it's one that can be doable and that can be winnable when you have all of the leaders within the party to endorse her, and in particular, folks like Barack Obama, as well as former Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Joanna, it's been great speaking with you. I know that there will be more developments this week, especially as President Biden is supposed to announce future plans for the party, for him. I guess many Americans will be waiting and eagerly awaiting to hear that. And then Kamala Harris will be addressing the nation much later at that event on the South Lawn of the White House. Thank you again for speaking with us.
Thank you, Amarachi.
President Joe Biden is not resigning as U.S. president. According to a statement he put out on social media platform X on Sunday, he will serve the remainder of his term as president up until January of 2025. He will not, however, be running against a former President Donald Trump when the November 5 elections come. And as we now know, shortly after his statement, he announced his endorsement for his vice president, Kamala Harris.
We have to remember who we are.
The U.S. President Joe Biden ended his re-election campaign on Sunday, July 21st, after fellow Democrats lost faith in his mental acuity and ability to beat Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump, leaving the presidential race in uncharted territory. The president announced his decision in a post on X, saying he will remain in his role as president and commander-in-chief until his term ends in January 2025 and will address the nation later this week. On Sunday evening, Biden endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris to take his place atop the Democratic ticket, having referred to her earlier as an extraordinary partner. She becomes the first black woman to do so in the party's history. If she wins, the 59-year-old former U.S. Senator and California Attorney General will be the first woman to become President of the United States. However, her 3.5-year White House tenure has been characterized by a lackluster start, staff turnover, and early policy portfolios, including migration from Central America, that did not produce major successes.
International humanitarian law must be respected.
But recent polls suggest Harris could do better than Biden against Trump, although she would face a tight contest. Polling outlet 538 said 37.1% of voters approve of Harris and 49.6% disapprove. Those numbers compare to 36.9% and 57.1% for Biden and 38.6% and 53.6% for Trump.
But while I may be the first woman in this office,
if confirmed by the Democratic Party, Harris will take over money raised by the Biden campaign and inherit campaign infrastructure, a critical advantage in just 4 months before Election Day on November 5. Reacting to news that President Biden will no longer be running in the race, former President Donald Trump took to his social media website, Truth Social, to criticize him. Trump alleged that Biden was unfit to run or serve as president and vowed to remedy the damage he's done very quickly, saying that Biden's doctor and the media knew that he was not capable of being president. We're still taking reactions from people around the world to the withdrawal of U.S. President Joe Biden from the November race. Ukrainians think a possible Trump presidency might emerge in November as a result, and that may not be of much help to Ukraine. Others are skeptical about Vice President Kamala Harris joining the race, saying that they think she was in the public eye enough to take the post of president. Another says Biden could not win the election. They think Trump will win. They also think that Trump himself has been very popular by Biden's announcement. I want to bring in now former Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Joe Keshi, who joins us from the nation's capital, Abuja. Ambassador Keshi, great to see you this afternoon or this evening. You will need to unmute. You will need to unmute, Ambassador. We can hardly hear you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Glad to see you too.
Yeah, we finally got it. Great to see you. And what were your initial reactions to President Biden's announcement? We've discussed this. We've gone back and forth about American politics, about a possibility of another Democratic administration in the White House. Let's get your reactions to that post on Twitter. I beg your pardon, on X.
You know, Amarachi, in the last 3 weeks since the debate, Trump has sucked out the oxygen from the race. From the poor performance of Joe Biden to the assassination attempt. In fact, it got so bad in terms of Trump every day on television that I was contemplating for a while to probably stop watching CNN, because all CNN was reporting about Joe Biden and the Democrats was not the campaign, but the campaign against Joe Biden to step down. But guess what? That changed yesterday night, at least the Nigerian time. That changed completely yesterday night. I actually watched from the time the announcement was made until I went to bed until about 1 o'clock Nigerian time, from about 8 to 1 o'clock Nigerian time. I can count how many times Trump was mentioned. What am I trying to say? The game has changed. Trump will no longer suck out the oxygen from the race. He now has a formidable contender to deal with. And what has happened between yesterday and this morning is a clear indication that if the Democrats can coalesce together, if they can come together, close ranks, they are going to give Trump a good run for his money. So I think that the Democrats are happy. I mean, I'm sure you also have heard that she has raised 46 million. 35 or 36,000 Black women have been working on the phone yesterday to show up support for Kamala. So it's going to be an interesting race. But for me, Trump thought for a while that it was going to be an easy race to the White House. That disappeared last night. We are now watching a completely different dynamics in the United States presidential race.
Yeah, but did he really think it was going to be an easy race? I mean, he thought with Biden, yes. I mean, he was happy with the way the campaign was going. The US president was refusing to step down, saying he could win this again. You know, he tried very hard to convince the donors that he could win this. He tried very hard to remain in the race. He kept with every opportunity. He said he was okay, he was ready, you know, and then, you know, I guess, you know, the conviction came with all the other top Democrats who spoke to him, even former President Barack Obama and other Democrats who spoke to him and convinced him, you know, that he should step down. But the former President, Donald Trump, has been hugging the spotlight since for about a week now, especially with the assassination attempt on Saturday.
That's exactly the point I was making. But since last night till today, it's all about the Democratic Party. It's all about Biden's resignation. It's all about Kamala Harris. Look, the dynamics has changed. Everybody is now talking about whether it's not a question of whether she can win. But the truth of the matter is that quite a number of things are going to work in her favor, and also a number of things would probably work against her. But the most important thing for the Democrats today is that the base of the Democratic Party has been energized. The young ones who said they were not going to bother themselves with the election because the two candidates are old folks, they are going to come back, you know, to begin to pay attention to the race. So we're going to have a very interesting race between now and November. And of course, you saw the polls of poll. Trump just has a 2% marginal lead. You know, for a lady who was not in the race, but now has been in the race, Trump is at 48, I think, and she's at 46. So, look, quite a number of things are going to act in her favor, and she's going to give Trump a good run for money. I'm actually waiting to see the debate.
Yeah, maybe help us. Yeah, Ambassador, maybe help us understand some of the things that might work in her favor. Because, we've seen these polls before. The polls are great, but they usually are not a good, well, not an accurate prediction of what could happen on the night of November 5. After the elections, we could see a change. Sometimes the Democrats have not performed well at the polls, and I think we've seen it in recent presidential elections, but they have outperformed in the polls. So what could work in Kamala Harris's favor?
Marachi, since Trump returned to the campaign or decided to run for the presidency, Trump has actually not gained much. Look, after the debate, the polls from the debate indicated that Trump got 68% of American voters, 68% of American voters said Trump was the best. Guess what? It was the same 68% Trump got 4 years ago in the first debate. Everything Trump has done, when you look at the poll, yeah, everybody does think he's probably best in the economy. The records do not show that. So there are so many things the Democrats can really use to run against Donald Trump. But to answer directly to your question, and why I said I'm looking forward to the debate, this lady is a great persecutor and is going to persecute Trump. I'm confident of that during the debate. All those lies Trump told in the first debate, forget it. She's going to fact check Trump immediately right at the debate stand. But the most important thing is that the Democratic base as of today is energized. There's a new life in that party. And all those everybody thought could get into the race, they have all declared support for her. So they are coming together. They are coming together. And yes, more importantly is the fact that the leadership of the party is working behind the scene to ensure that there's no contest that would again disunite the Democrats. They just want to ensure that they bring everybody together around the candidate and then begin to face the election.
Well, that's if, the primaries has been called by the party's leadership does work out in the end. Some people, especially here in Africa, are commending, well, haven't heard leaders' response to President Biden's announcement, but, people on the streets have said this is something good. African leaders should also emulate this. What do you think about that, about what I like to call geriatric politics?
Amarachi, I wish you had left African leaders out of this conversation. They are not going to do it. Forget it. They would rather die. How old is the president of, is it Uganda? How old is he? And other presidents, some who have spent, they changed the tenure. They have finished. They are looking for a way, to extend the tenure. Even look at younger Yadema, now wants to be like his father, perpetually in office until death, do come his way. So let's not bring African leaders into this conversation at all. I don't see any of them doing that, neither now in the near future. Mugabe was a good example. He died in office. The man who succeeded him is almost as old, but nobody is showing signs of wanting to retire or give away to the younger elements. So let's not bring African leaders into this conversation. Let's focus on how the American election will shape out in the next couple of days. It's going to be interesting to watch, and we just all will have to hold our breath and see what happens, between now and August next. Actually, in about 2 or 3 weeks' time, if she's endorsed by the party, the race is on, and we begin to watch what happens and who will win the election.
Yes, so hopefully at the Democratic Convention, which is sometime in August, I believe the second week in August, we should know by then who is the party's nominee. Let's talk about America's future relations with Ukraine and with Israel. With Ukraine especially because President Biden will not be around after January next year. And I know the Ukrainian president has reacted to President Biden's decision to pull out of the race. What do you think will happen with American support of Ukraine in the war with Russia?
Well, look, if the Democrats retain the president, the White House, there certainly would be no problem because the new president will certainly continue to support Ukraine. In fact, if you see the line of attack coming in from the Trump campaign, they are trying to link every policy of Biden to Kamala and saying that, you know, she's just going to do the same thing like Biden has done. So we should expect. And in any case, look, American foreign policy does not change fundamentally. You know, the core issues are still the same. But for all Trump did 4 years ago, he did not pull out of NATO to start with. He only just said they should, you know, up their contributions and the rest of it. But the president of Ukraine has also done something significant. He has reached out to Trump himself, and they are talking, and they will visit with each other sooner or later, you know. So we can all just hope for the best of the people of Ukraine that if the vice president wins and becomes the president, NATO and America is going to continue to support Ukraine.
What about Israel? I know that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also, you know, commended President Joe Biden, said he's been friends with him for over 40 years. He looks forward to when he'll meet with him and then, you know, convey his good wishes to him. What do you think would happen after November?
I think they are meeting tomorrow. Look, fundamentally, the American policy towards Israel will not change. You know, what will probably change, and I'm hoping that between now and the next 2 weeks, there's some good news about ceasefire and other things that would, you know, would follow. If that happens, that will probably be one issue that will not disturb you know, the vice president. But the truth of the matter is that the America policy will remain the same between now and January next, you know, and between now and January next year, I sincerely believe that something will be worked out that will enable a ceasefire and some, you know, some other talks to take place with regards to the future of the Palestinians and what happens in Gaza. But fundamentally, there will be not much change. Not many things will change in the policy of America.
Ambassador Joe Keshi, thank you so much for speaking with us. I appreciate these conversations that we have on the air and off the air as well. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No, following the announcement of President Joe Biden dropping out of the presidential race, a global policy analyst, Mr. Adebayo Oluwake, says it must have been a tough decision for President Biden if he is to consider the legacy he will want to leave behind. He says that though there are advantages and disadvantages of Vice President Kamala Harris's continuing with the election race, Democrats may consider other aspirants for the presidency. He also says that Trump's assassination attempt has given the former president a strong momentum, which may play to the Republican Party's advantage. He was guest on our breakfast program, Morning Brief.
I think for President Biden, it was a tough decision. The reason being that he would most likely have been looking at what kind of legacy he would like to leave behind. The first, and then secondly, usually in the United States, as you know, most presidents often go for a second term. It's rare to have a president who would not go for a second term. So if you don't go for a second term, it's like not normal. It's not more about his age, but it's actually about his health. And, you know, we've seen President Biden falter several times when he had to address public gatherings. We've seen him, you know, lose focus. We've seen him forget things, you know, and for the President of the United States, who has the powers, not just to declare war, but also to order the detonation of atomic weapons. this was becoming frightening, not just for the world, but for Americans themselves. I believe that Vice President Harris does have this advantage, truly, that she's been in the White House for close to 4 years. She studied President Biden closely. But while that is an advantage, don't forget that there are those who would also say that she shares in whatever problems or weaknesses the administration may have faced or may have. You know, having been in the White House for close to 4 years, for instance, she's been accused of not having handled the immigration issue very well. Secondly, there's the Ukrainian problem. The immigration issue is a domestic issue. The Ukrainian issue is an international one, foreign policy-wise. And not a few people in the US believe that while it was good to support Ukraine, the United States has not set any benchmarks and has not set any objectives. Now, looking at her strengths, yes, she was an attorney, general of the state of California. She's a very good prosecutor, or she was, and therefore she's a very good debater, because you cannot be an effective prosecutor if you cannot debate, efficiently. So this is one major strength people feel that the VP would have if she was their candidate and if she did take on President Trump. But we'll see exactly how this plays out. I think the biggest shot that President Trump had, and it's rather unfortunate, was the fact that there was an attempted assassination on his life. So that he survived that good enough, and then it has given him a momentum. That has really given Trump a momentum. That has given him some sympathy, even on the side of those who normally don't like Trump. And if you look at the Republican convention, and if you watched President Trump at that convention, he looked like a different President Trump. And so I feel strongly that at this moment, President Trump has a strong momentum. How that will play out, of course, we don't know, because the two parties essentially are struggling for voters who haven't made up their minds. But let's see what will happen, whether all of this for the Democrats will be a masterstroke or a masterflow.
In the meantime, U.S. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle has admitted to Congress that she and her agency failed when a would-be assassin wounded Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump at the July 13 campaign rally in Pennsylvania this week. Monday's hearing marks the first round of congressional oversight of the attempted assassination. On Wednesday, FBI Director Christopher Wray will appear before the House Judiciary Committee. And House Speaker Mike Johnson is also due to unveil a bipartisan task force to serve as a nexus point for House investigations. Cheatle has resisted calls for her resignation from top Republicans, including Johnson and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell.
My name is Kimberly Cheatle, and I'm the Director of the United States Secret Service. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. The assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump on July 13th is the most significant operational failure of the Secret Service in decades, and I am keeping him and his family in my thoughts. The Secret Service's solemn mission is to protect our nation's leaders. On July 13th, we failed. As a Director of the United States Secret Service, I take full responsibility for any security lapse of our agency. We are fully cooperating with ongoing investigations. We must learn what happened, and I will move heaven and earth to ensure that an incident like July 13th does not happen again.
Back to the world today, an Israeli airstrike hit a tent used by local journalists inside the Al-Aqsa hospital in Gaza's Deir al-Balal, where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are sheltering, killing one journalist and wounding 2 other people. A video filmed in the aftermath of the strike showed people trying to put out a fire inside a tent by dousing it with water, while some called for a fire extinguisher. Israel has vowed to eradicate Hamas after militants killed 1,200 people and took more than 250 hostages in a cross-border assault on October 7 last year. Meanwhile, medical staff at Gaza's Nasser hospital say the situation at the medical facility, where a large number of casualties are being treated, is out of control as Israeli tanks, shell and airstrikes killed at least 37 people near Khan Yunis. Israel issued new orders to evacuate some neighborhoods following what it said was renewed attacks from those areas. The health ministry said the deaths include several women and children. Now, Israel declared dead on Monday 2 more of its hostages being held in Gaza as talks to secure a ceasefire deal that would include the release of some 120 captives were set to resume later this week. The Israeli military said it was still investigating the deaths and captivity of the 2 hostages, identified as Yagev Bushtab, a 35-year-old sound technician, and Alex Danzig, a historian, who were both abducted from their homes in Kibbutz Zim near the border with Gaza during the Hamas October 7 attack on southern Israel. An Israeli negotiation team is due on Thursday to set off to mediate Gaza ceasefire talks, which would include the issue of hostages being released in return for Palestinian prisoners. Tanzania's Information Minister Nape Nnauye has been removed from his post following an outcry over comments he made suggesting elections could be rigged. Nnauye was filmed at a rally on July 15, saying that he would help a fellow ruling party MP win the 2025 election. He said that election results are not necessarily those in the ballot box, rather they depend on the person counting and making the announcements. Following a public backlash after the video of his controversial remarks went viral, he said he made them in jest. President Samia Suluhu Hassan sacked him from the cabinet on Sunday as part of a wider reshuffle, but she did not give reasons for her decision. Over in Kenya, officials are appealing for help to find containers of a highly toxic chemical that was looted from an overturned lorry near the capital, Nairobi. The accident happened about 35 kilometers from the capital, causing a spillage of sodium cyanide on the tarmac. After the lorry overturned late on Saturday, several containers were taken by people who rushed the scene. It's very common in Kenya for trucks to be looted following a road accident. At least 6 people have been killed after a gunman entered a nursing home in northwestern Croatia, shooting several people, including his mother, and injuring 6 others. One of the wounded later died in hospital, taking the death toll to 6, while 4 remain in critical condition. Authorities have given no motive for the attack, but Croatian media reports that the gunman is a war veteran. One of the victims was a nursing home employee. The killer fled the scene, but was later arrested by police. French President Emmanuel Macron has visited the Paris 2024 Olympic Village 4 days before the Games begin. Paris 2024 will officially start on Friday amid pronounced security concerns at a time of heightened geopolitical tensions over the wars in Ukraine and in Gaza. The Games kick off with an ambitious opening ceremony along the Seine, with athletes paraded in barges down the river. Participation is optional, however, and Israeli officials have declined to say whether Israel's athletes will be taking part. Those athletes will receive 24-hour protection during the Paris Olympics, according to the French Interior Minister. Another treat for those who'll be in Paris this Olympic season. Visitors can send home a smell of France with a recently released commemorative scratch and sniff stamp showing the country's famed baguette. The smell is sweet with hints of vanilla and reminiscent of walking in the country's enticing boulangerie and pâtisserie rather than an actual baguette. Parisian stationery shop Le Carré en d'Ancre has described the smell as bakery scents. A local Parisian boulangerie, Lyonnais Bakery, has said all put their noses to the test and came up with a vanilla and even flan custard, but not a baguette itself. The baguette is considered emblematic of France and a staple in French diets. We'll end the bulletin with this really heartwarming story. Next to a cable car station in the Bolivian capital of La Paz, stray dogs have found a home with toys, beds, food, and the love from an entire community. The shelter was created to provide a proper home for the dogs, many of whom are elderly and were already living near the cable car station even before it was built. Volunteers play with the dogs, take care of them, and clean the space, which was donated by the cable car authorities. The initiative aligns with La Paz Legislation 239, which recognizes community animals as dogs or cats living on the streets and cared for by a group of people, particularly neighbors in a local street or a neighborhood. And that's the world today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.